Welcome to the Phillip Wylie Show. Take a look behind the curtain of professional hacking and hear compelling discussions with guests from diverse backgrounds who share a common curiosity and passion for challenges and their job. And now, here's your host, offensive security professional, educator, mentor, and author, Phillip Wylie.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Phillip Wylie Show. I'm really excited today to have Ashley Sequeira joining me today. So Ashley and I know each other from the cybersecurity community, and it's been, I guess, a few years back now that we finally got to meet in person. I think maybe it was it B-Sides Las Vegas the first time we met?
I think you were actually doing a workshop for women in cyber jitsu. It was like the intro to pen testing workshop. And I was one of
Okay.
the first time I learned about you as a human. And then I think we officially met in person at B-Sides LV.
Okay. Yeah, we get to see each other B-Sides Las Vegas and other conferences from time to time. Got lucky and got to see each other several times last year, so that's always a good thing. So how is your 2025 starting out?
Really good. Just started a new role at Census Search. I'm a senior solutions engineer, which is really fun. It's a fancy way of saying very senior SE, but it's only been a few weeks, but it's been probably one of the coolest things I've done so far in my career.
Very cool. So yeah, I'm glad you landed somewhere good, because hard to find places sometimes that is cool with this public speaking and the community stuff. So that's always a plus. So as far as Census goes, I've heard of Census. Are they a similar product to like Shodan, or is it different?
So we're very similar to Shodan in this fact that we scan the whole internet. But what I like about Census is the depth. So we go big and we go deep as far as our data sets, which is why I chose Census over everywhere else I was interested in looking. We also do attack surface management, which is really cool. And that's kind of a newish space for me. But if you do security and you kind of understand, how threats can present themselves in a lot of uncommon ways, I think it makes a lot of sense that attack surface management is kind of where, security products are going.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that's also thinking back, because I used to work for Cycognito and they were an attack surface management product. And I know that Census was one of their competitors. So it's kind of interesting, and also interesting that you're doing the piece kind of like Shodan uses, because a lot of people think of Shodan, but that this is another product out there that does something similar, goes in depth and more things. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's changed my whole perspective on, again, how I even approach what I'm looking at on the internet, which is really cool. I mean, being in this career field, anytime you get a chance to learn something new or have your perspective shifted a little bit to look with fresh eyes at something, you can't beat it. And so for me, that was kind of the most exciting part.
Awesome. So I have all my guests share their hacker origin stories. So if you wouldn't mind sharing yours.
Man, how do I start? So I spent about 13 years in the Army. Hilariously enough, I was in the band first. I was a trumpet player, out here playing reveille and all that fun stuff. And, about 2010, 2011, I had still been kind of doing Taekwondo a little bit. I was still competing here and there, did some cool stuff, went to the military Olympics, but I get back and I'm like, well, dang, I like music, but, I kind of had already picked up that everything was shifting. We had tech was blowing up. It wasn't just being the IT guy. There's now IT teams, there's now security teams and things like that. So I knew I wanted to pivot into IT. And so I had the Army retrain me to be an IT specialist, which was pretty cool. They paid for my Security Plus, which was even cooler, because that was kind of what gave me that first kind of look into security. I get out, I've worked a couple jobs at this point, startups, phone support, things like that. And I meet my now husband, and he took me to my first DEF CON as our away trip. Our first away trip was a HackerCon. And, I didn't know what the hell was going on. I was still, wow, this is really scary, but really fascinating. And so I get back and I go full bore because I hadn't finished my degree yet. I switched over to cybersecurity officially. Went to community college. Shout out to community college for career changers, because it's the cheapest and some of the most comprehensive ways to do that. And then I did my bachelor's and all that stuff. But I got my first job at a healthcare SOC. So I worked in the SOC. And then the craziest thing ever, Palo Alto Networks was doing a veterans training. And I went and I got recruited out of the class, which that's not a normal everyday thing. And I was there for about 5 years. But I mean, from that point, I pretty much dove headfirst into the hacker community. I mean, I was going to DEF CON every year. I wanted to be at B-sides. I started volunteering. And eventually, I show up to conferences and everyone's like, "Oh, hey, Ashley." I'm like, "Oh, hi," and I've poured a lot into it because it's what gave me direction. I worked at like UPS slinging boxes and like GameStop and Old Navy and just all these kind of weird jobs that didn't really fit me. And then I find, tech and I'm like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be this whole time. And so if you know my hacker handle, to anyone who's watching, you were probably at the ShmooCon where I publicly sassed the host of Hacker Jeopardy at DEF CON. And that's how I got my hacker handle. So yeah, I mean, at this point, I went from kind of having some basic security knowledge to really specializing in a lot of different places. If I'm not at a con, I'm like sad about it. I want to go to everything. So that's how I got in the community. And now everyone's like, you can't get rid of me.
That's awesome. And we're lucky to have you in the community. Very cool story. So if you wouldn't mind sharing some of your advice for those that are wanting to break into cybersecurity.
Yeah, I mean, it's really tough right now. I've seen everything from pay for my class and I'll get you a six-figure job, all the way to you don't need the help desk to get into cyber. But the reality is, like, you kind of need a little bit of everything. And it depends on what you're trying to do for that first role. It depends on where you want to work, what you're willing to kind of, sacrifice, because it's a lot of work in the beginning. I mean, I worked in IT for like 5 years before I got my first security job, but that experience gave me a lot of interesting perspective to know where I wanted to focus and where I could use my skill set. The other thing is that I networked my butt off. We talk a lot about you need the certs, you need the degree, you need the experience, but we don't talk about the network. I mean, my last three roles, actually my last four roles, all four companies I've worked at were all referrals. Somebody was like, "You've got the goods. I'm gonna stick my neck out for you and see if I can get you a referral." And, practice your interviews, tailor your resume, make connections, talk to people, ask for advice. I mean, that's all I did. I had a couple of people that I'm sure they're sick of hearing from me at this point, because I was blowing them up like every other week, asking like, "Hey, I'm thinking about this. What do you think?" And it's important to not just have like a mentor, you need mentors, because they'll see things that you don't see. They'll position you for things that you may not even realize that like you could be good at, but they already see it before you do. And that's really what kind of helped me drive and start climbing, within my career, to find that next good step. The other thing is, don't give up. Like, persistence is everything. One of the things that I remember being told when I was very young doing karate was that I was very tenacious. And apparently that's true, because for as many no's as I got, there's always one yes. And so, a lot of folks are saying like, "Oh, I'm submitting like 100 apps and not getting a job or not getting a call back." Again, your network is how you beat that AI firewall, as I like to call it. Getting that referral can get you in the door to at least get an interview. And if you're a rock star, they'll see it. So, and yeah, so just don't give up, network, tailor your stuff, and just ask a lot of questions. Be willing to learn. Also, volunteer in the community, because you could be volunteering with someone at, say, B-Sides Las Vegas, and they're a CISO somewhere.
Yeah, that's some very interesting points there, because one of the things I've witnessed from some of my former students that had volunteered, like at our local B-Sides, it's like you kind of really accelerate your voice or your connection with that community, doing one B-Sides, and it's almost like you've been in the community for a year or two. So it's amazing how quickly you can get to know people, and plus people in the community really appreciate the volunteers and respect that. So that goes a long way. So yeah, one of the things I really want to talk to you about, because back when I saw your talk back in B-Sides Albuquerque on the security research you did, if you wouldn't mind kind of getting into that research that you did, which is very awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest, it was so interesting that it ended up being this thing, because people joke that, "Oh, you don't always set out to find something to research, you stumble onto it." And this one stumbled onto me. So I had a family member that works in critical infrastructure, and basically I went home to visit. They're like, "Hey, check this thing out that I got." And they tell me the name of it. I'm like, "What is it?" It's basically just like a little IoT, like Android streaming device. And, there's a lot of things where, if we think about like how us as like Americans like interact with things, especially, we like to watch TV, we like to watch trash TV, and we like to watch sports. And so this little Android streaming box was exactly that. It's like a little pirate box that gives you access to all those things. And so I started digging into it and it was actually calling out, like beaconing to some not great places. And so I dug even deeper, did some network traffic analysis on it. And it turns out it was absolutely doing not good things. Residential proxy traffic, which is very similar to a lot of the former IoT botnets that have been taken down recently, a lot of the same types of behavior. And, it was weird in the beginning because at first I was just kind of like, okay, it's a pirate streaming box. And then it changed its behavior. And then we had our election and it changed its behavior again. And so I could start timing the behavior changes of the box based on what's going on here, like within our geopolitical space. And so at this point, it's now turned into a whole thing. I can't say much more than that, but it's a whole thing. That's all I can really tell you. But really kicked off kind of like that light bulb for me because I had also struggled to find a good fit within my career. I'd done SOC, I'd done a little bit of firewalls, I'd done some source stuff, and I get into research and like, oh, this is it. Like it kind of opened the doors to the things that I wanted to be doing all day, every day, which is research. And I don't have a computer science degree. I have a sociology degree. I minored in political science. I took some psychology classes. And so all of that stuff layered with my technical kind of prowess these days, it really helped paint a huge and clear picture that we sometimes don't see when we're only looking at like, well, what is it doing from a technical perspective? There was a lot of other stuff behind it that really created the circumstances where, oh, this is more than just a pirate TV box.
Very interesting. And everyone is so worried, the government was worried about TikTok, and this is, typical data like marketing companies would get. And I guess there could be some arguments that some of the content they're serving is different than what it's serving in their native country. But, just the fact that everyone is not thinking about some of these hardware devices, and there's so many of these cheap hardware devices. I hear of people doing, we had people that have come to Dallas Hackers Association that got these different Wi-Fi devices. And actually, I'm trying to think if they came out with any good research out of it, because I got a similar streaming device that someone had gave me, a friend of mine. I spoke at a conference that he did, and he gave us all these little cheap TV streaming things. And I ended up giving it to one of the local researchers, and I'm not sure if he found anything on that or not. I just need to go back and ask, but I've seen a lot of people come to Dallas Hackers that were getting some of these different Wi-Fi routers or different internet routers, and they were checking out the traffic, and it was phoning home to places that it shouldn't be.
Exactly.
So people are so worried about TikTok, but then you got hardware devices that are a bigger risk.
I mean, I don't want to sound like a tinfoil hat wearer, but I feel like TikTok's kind of like the big distraction while a lot of this other stuff is going on behind the scenes. I mean, if we really, really stop and think about, okay, information warfare, info ops, like what do we do? Well, we have the big distraction over here while we're laying the seeds over here. And this is the stuff that no one's looking at. Everyone's looking up here. And this keeps happening. And we keep just finding more and more, weird traffic on the internet. We keep finding more and more, TP link routers were absolutely being used as part of a botnet. And it's like, a lot of people have TP link routers. And so it's unfortunate, but we really have to start, kind of fine tooth combing the stuff that we're bringing into our homes.
Yes. Yeah. And one of the things that's really cool about your background is just the fact that geopolitical background kind of played in helping you research. A lot of times you don't think of that kind of stuff. You think of being able to reverse engineer, hardware, firmware off of devices and all this stuff, learn how to do low level programming languages, but people really don't think about the geopolitical piece. I guess if you were someone that worked doing something like that in the military or for the government, you might understand it, but that's actually pretty interesting to be able to leverage that. So it's something promising for anyone listening that wants to be in cybersecurity, is to leverage those skills.
Yeah, I mean, threat intel and threat research, I mean, it's actually fairly broad. It's not as simple as like, oh, I looked at some malware. It could be understanding that little piece of context to why, a group of devices or a device is doing something. And, for everyone that's listening, again, I did eventually learn to code, but I didn't start there. Okay. So don't feel intimidated if that's not a thing. The other thing is how much I learned over the course of just doing this research, because the funniest part, I think for me, was when I first wanted to start analyzing it. And I'm like, how do I get packet captures at my house? Like I'd never like asked that question out loud because again, if you don't have like a lab or something, how would you do that? And when I first came into security, like I'm sitting in my office, I had like a whole like aha moment because I'm like, oh yeah, when I had no clue what I was doing, I bought all this stuff off Hack 5 and I ended up using a packet squirrel to do packets in line, but it ended up being actually one of the better ways to do it. I mean, I probably could have made something, but given that I'm more of a blue teamer, more of like an intelligence kind of person, it's not that I didn't know how to do it, but I wanted to quickly kind of get in there and know what to do. And so now I have this little farm of like packet squirrels with a bunch of these different types of devices, all, talking and streaming, but I'm getting real life packet captures. The other thing is I am still going to get into the firmware and the hardware because I barely scratched the surface with my first initial findings. That was all just network traffic analysis. I'm still excited to dig into the firmware and rip apart the box and see what it's doing at a low level too. So like you get a little bit of everything with security research, which I think is the fun part.
And that's the interesting thing too, with your background, understanding that network side, because a lot of times when you think about security research, you think about bug bounty, you think about reversing binaries, firmware and all this stuff, but sometimes people don't think about that network traffic, but that's a very important piece.
I mean, that was kind of the smoking gun in the very beginning. It's like I'm watching it do this stuff, and then I got another one, and I'm like, oh, it's doing the same stuff. Let me get two more. They're all doing the same thing, and some of them were like different makers, different brands, things like that. But the networking part, I mean, I see all kinds of memes and stuff on like LinkedIn where it's like the guy with the long leg and he's stepping over like IT fundamentals and like networking fundamentals straight to cyber. Don't follow that meme, you guys. Like, learn the networking. It's important. It's context that if you really want to be good at this, you have to have it.
Yeah, I understand, because that's a lot of times, because fortunately for me, I had to start out in IT because when in 97, when I was getting started, usually about the only way you could work in security is if you worked for the government or something, because no one was really doing cybersecurity or data security as they were calling it at the time. But I kind of had to start out as a sysadmin, didn't know about security, then found out about security. But fortunately, it worked out that way for me because sometimes I'm impatient and want to jump ahead to what I want to do. But fortunately, I was forced to go this route. But yeah, I agree with what you're saying, because some people think you have to work in those jobs, but I don't know what your opinion is. But my thinking is, if at least you get that skill set or you gain that knowledge, you don't have to put in all those years, but it's helpful.
Yeah, I mean, having the knowledge, doing the job, I think both of those are valid ways to do it. But there's something to be said, like when you're in the trenches of the help desk and you see all this crazy stuff, because the help desk is the first line of defense in security for most corporations. A lot of people don't think of it that way, but it's true. Like if someone calls in and says, hey, my laptop got stolen, and you don't do the remote lock and wipe, and that device is now out there. If that help desk analyst failed to do that, they didn't stop what could have potentially led to something bigger. If you get 15 people calling in about, hey, I keep getting this weird email, well, the help desk might be the first ones to know that there might be a phishing campaign. So I do think that there's a lot of value in working those earlier jobs, but at the same time, you still need the foundational knowledge, whatever that looks like. You can't really get away from it anymore, I think.
Yeah, that's kind of like being a journalist and not taking English composition, not knowing how to
Exactly.
write. Yeah, jumping ahead. So yeah, just with doing the security research, what is a good way for someone to get started that wants to do security research?
I mean, I'll be honest, like I spent a lot of time reading in the very beginning. I'm a big fan of No Starch Press. This is still like on my desk every day. Shout out to No Starch Press. And again, I knew what I was looking at was an IoT device. So I got some literature and just got some information and just started reading, because you got to kind of understand like what it is you're about to work on, what you're working with. And again, you have to know the context in which you're about to try to understand something. The other thing too is you can just find, if you think there's something around your house that might be interesting just to dig into it. The other thing is if there's something that interests you, and, security research isn't always something technical. It could be, why do we keep seeing the same tactics, techniques, and protocols from a certain set of adversaries versus another set of adversaries? Why is it that, you know, large scale global economics can impact cybersecurity? Like it can look a lot of different ways. So if you want to get started, find something you're interested in and see if you can put a security lens over it and see what you come up with.
Yeah, that's great advice. And so one of the things too I want to get into is, because we kind of were talking a little bit about community before, before we started. So if you just kind of would share your experience with community, because you had a pretty good story. We're kind of comparing stories, but if you wouldn't mind kind of sharing your story about community and your thoughts on community.
Yeah, I mean, community is everything. When times are tough, you need community. When times are good, you need community. And, all of us are weathering some type of storm right now, but I think one of the things that when I check on people and we're all talking, we all come to the same conclusion. It's like, thank goodness for this community. The way that I got involved kind of initially, I went to like my very first B-sides. It was actually B-sides SF. I only went for a day, but then I asked one of the volunteers, I'm like, hey, is this something, are there other B-sides? Because again, I didn't know. I was still new. I'm like, are there other B-sides? Is this something I can get involved with? They said, oh, absolutely. We're done, but like maybe try like B-sides Las Vegas. And so I did that. So 2019 gets here and I volunteered for the very first time at B-Sides Las Vegas. And there were a couple of folks that had been around a long time and I just kind of got like adopted into the group, which was really cool. And I still call these people, lifelong friends. And volunteering is fun. Sometimes the work is hard, but like you're all there, we're laughing, we're taking care of each other. And you really get a sense of camaraderie. And I think for especially like a lot of veterans, volunteering is a great way to like still get involved and give back in a way that seems very similar to our military service because we're obviously serving something bigger than ourselves. And if that speaks to you, like volunteer. And, it can be local stuff like trying to build a DEF CON group here in New Mexico. And you can build community anywhere. It can be at your campus. It can be at your church if that's something you do. I mean, there's people that are interested in tech and security everywhere. And sometimes it's just a matter of going to places and saying, hey, here I am. And other people will find you. The other thing is the more you get involved, I feel like this community gives it back when you give it out. Even with my research, the last few times, the first time I gave the talk, you're at B-Sides Albuquerque. It was a pretty full room, but we were small B-Sides. I gave a talk again at B-Sides Dallas, a little bit more full, gave it at another conference. The room was packed. And then I gave it again at Cactus Con and they were turning people away at the door because I had been giving so much to the community that everyone wanted to support me. Yeah, like I don't even know how to describe the feeling of like, wow, like you guys are here to support me. That's so cool. And I go to my friends' talks when they get on stage and I want to support everybody else too. So you just have to get involved. Like there's no way to be successful in this industry without giving back to the community, I feel like you got to give it, and it doesn't have to look the same. It could be I went to the career village and read resumes. It could be I gave a talk to a community college class or a high school class about working in IT or working in tech. So however you give back to your community, just give back. You have to. It's required. I'm telling you, it's required.
Yeah, it's just kind of awesome, the feelings, because you were kind of talking about how the community resonated with us different than other experiences. Because like for my background, powerlifting, being part of the powerlifting community and cybersecurity, the powerlifting community and physical fitness community, I just didn't have connections like that because one of the things when people would quit powerlifting, you never heard anything from them again. And with the cybersecurity community, I mean, it's some of the best friends I've made in my life have been
Yeah.
through the cybersecurity community.
I actually have a really good friend of mine. We actually knew each other from the army and from Taekwondo. And I spent 20 years in Taekwondo and I have one friend to show for all of my time. But he and I both moved into security about the same time. And now our annual catch up, it's not like another conference, it's always like DEF CON. And so we have been friends since like 2011 and it's 2025 now. And we're still just as happy to see each other. We actually were talking about it earlier this week. Like we're actually closer now because of the cybersecurity and the community than we ever were when we still did martial arts together. So there's just something about it. Yeah, like I don't know what I would do if I suddenly could not be a part of the community anymore.
Yeah, same here, because before I was part of the community, just things you would do, of course, I had family and friends, but now it's like I spend so much time going to different meetups and conferences and stuff, and I just couldn't imagine what it'd be like without it. Because just like I was
Right.
mentioning, like last week I went to a conference, I had opportunity to go to Zero Trust World, and what a better thing to do to get your mind off of being out of work is to go to a conference and hang out with a bunch of other security professionals.
Yeah, commiserate a little bit. I mean, I spent, 20 years traveling, competing. I coached, I did kind of all of it. And it's kind of funny because I would be gone all the time for that. And then I get into security and I'm not gone as much, but I'm still traveling as much as I was before, which led me to realize I actually did like traveling. I was like, huh. I like actually being out on the road. But yeah, I mean, I'm always so happy to go to a conference. And, I've been trying to challenge myself to go to conferences I usually wouldn't go to or like weren't in the region. I relocated from the Bay Area and being here in New Mexico, I was like, well, what's around? And so that's how I found Cactus Con. And now like I wouldn't miss it for the world. I used to go to ShmooCon up in, last year, this year, it was a bummer, but also really cool because that's a really cool community. And there's people I wouldn't have met otherwise that I got to meet. And so I kind of want to go to Deadwood. I know that's like a kind of random one, but like I hear good things about it. I'm sure there's more great people to meet there. So, and again, that's all part of the network as you kind of travel and meet people. And now like, the LinkedIn's crazy and, the Signal chats are out of control. But I love keeping up with everyone and checking on everybody. And yeah, I'm like the den mother, I feel like, for all my little groups. So
Very cool. So we're getting down towards the end of the episode. Is there anything you'd like to share before we close it out?
just that, with everything going on, I won't necessarily say what, but I'm sure we're all aware that there's just a lot of discombobulation is what I'll call it. Just find your people, find where your heart is. And like for me, it's this community, it's research, it's mentoring, it's being a goon at DEF CON, it's whatever that looks like. If you don't know where to start, you can always reach out to me. I'm kind of everywhere. And if you see me at any conferences, you can always say hi. And the other thing is, yes, I was in that Google video because I'm sure people watching that are new to cyber have probably watched that Google training. And yes, that was me in the video because people come up and ask, were you in that video? What do you do for a living? Like, was it the Google video? They're like, yes. I'm like, okay, yeah, that was me. So hi, everybody from the Google video.
Well, thanks for joining. It was great catching up with you. And thanks for sharing your wisdom with my listeners.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everyone. And we'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you for listening to the Phillip Wylie Show. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. In the meantime, to learn more about Phillip, go to thehackermaker.com and connect with him on LinkedIn and Twitter at Phillip Wylie. Until next time.